Welcome to episode 4 of the Event Modeling and Event Sourcing podcast with your hosts, Adam and Martin, or Martin and Adam, whichever order you prefer. Thank you for joining us. Always good to see you, Martin.
Yeah, same for you, Adam.
Let's dive right in then and get going on some of the announcements that we have. So, again, a reminder about the workshop next Saturday, end of this month, November 30th, bright and early at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So anyone in Europe and North America can catch it. Links are on the event modeling website and in the show notes for this episode. So hopefully we'll see you there. And then let's talk about the next announcement, which is the Missing Chapters. The Missing Chapters installment, Martin.
Yeah, great. The next Missing Chapter is basically done, and I hope to add it to the book tonight. So basically directly after the podcast, hopefully. It's about Missing Chapter number 2. It's about security, how to model security, how to implement security. What about security? Everything is in there. It's a pretty long chapter after all.
Yeah, it's a pretty scary kind of topic for some people that were just maybe kicking the tires of event sourcing to kind of understand how you deal with some of the patterns that are out there for traditional development. You know, what can you do? So I think this will be an invaluable resource for people that are adopting event modeling and event sourcing specifically. Yeah,
I mean, security is always a topic. Ask 3 people and you will get at least 4 answers how to do it, right? So
exactly.
I'm offering my point of view. You might agree, you might disagree, but at least you will learn something, hopefully.
Yeah, so that's a great chapter. And the book, it's still number 1 on LeanPub. It's its 4th week, I think, at the number 1 starting there. So a whole month of number 1 spot. Obviously, people want to learn about event modeling and event sourcing. So great to see that. Hopefully, that continues. I think you and I are both quite happy with the amount of attention
absolutely
that the book has gotten. So amazing. Yeah, highly recommend it. Please check it out. LeanPub, and now print book. Next announcement about the book.
Directly.
Martin.
Yeah. Since today, I got the email from Amazon today. It's available as print. So you can order it if you want. Only problem, you won't get the Missing Chapters in the print version. You will later. But for the moment, it's only available in LeanPub.
So that's a good point, because I think people should have both, because you want the print book to sit on your desk and be a regular book, especially if you're used to, the dead tree versions of books. It's good to have that. But then to have these, the PDF version, the LeanPub version, give you something every couple of weeks to add to your knowledge. And then for those that want to wait, I think, what's your plan? Maybe every 6 months, every year to have
something like
another book?
Yeah, something like this. I'm not yet sure. We will see. It will definitely be available at some point in time, but there is no definite plan. Right?
Yeah, well, that's really good news. I can't wait to get mine. Before the podcast started, you said you asked for my address. I'm guessing you're sending me one. I was gonna buy it myself because I want to support your efforts, but fine. I guess it's getting close to Christmas, and this will be quite the gift to have that. So I do want. I'm not sure if it's coming straight from Amazon, but if it's not and you're mailing it, please sign it before.
I will. You're the first to ask for this. So
okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for that. I can't wait. I feel like a kid before Christmas again.
I mean, I ordered a whole bunch already for me, and I will definitely try to give some away for free, also to listeners of the podcast. We need to figure out how we do this.
Maybe 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 we do that when if people sign up for the workshop, they get a signed book from you. How's that?
Oh yeah,
I'll pay for the shipping.
Let's do that. That's nice.
Okay, so yeah, maybe we'll make a fun announcement. It's Christmas. I feel in a spirit of giving, so let's do that.
I mean, that's nice.
All right, and also, Martin, another piece of news from you, which is excellent, which is, I believe, the newsletter We didn't want to talk about this, or do we want to talk about it?
We can.
Yeah.
So not sure if all the people listening to the podcast are aware of the newsletter, which basically comes along with the podcast. Typically, we try to pick up one topic, either from the newsletter, either from the podcast, or from the community. Last newsletter was a question from the community. Just we're picking it up and just getting a little bit deeper into the topic. So if you're interested to just learn more, once per week, just sign up. We already have more than 80 people on the newsletter, which is quite good. So maybe a good another resource if you want to have more event sourcing in your inbox.
Yeah, that's a nice little reminder, and it's quite nice to see the uptake, because we really haven't been promoting this heavily, but we just mentioned it here and there, and people are signing up. So wonderful. I can't wait for my first article in there too. So that's coming up, and so let's get into the main topics. We got a couple for you this week. The first one is the event command state pattern. So event modeling has this idea that there's a very definite flow of information coming from events. From commands to events to state to the state pattern. So some people, and I think it might be the issue with the original article that I wrote on event modeling, where I allowed some shortcuts for quick notation. I think it's causing a little bit of a confusion, and I think it's getting to the point where a version 2 of the main article comes out to kind of explain all of the modern event modeling practices, where we really solidified some of the practices. So I think it also may be a technical push from people. There's a lot of, in the past decade, there's been a lot of reactive patterns around the event-driven community, where you have this, I have an event, I'm going to react to it, and therefore it's a command. So this is quite prevalent, and it's not entirely accurate, and it's quite limiting in some cases. And worse yet, in some cases, it provides an incentive for some anti-patterns, which are things like fat events or artificially constructed events, just so that you can say that we have, a reactive paradigm in our architecture or something. So I definitely see this coming from the technical side, pushing that in. I don't see any of this side, any of this approach coming in from the business side, and so that tells me right away from the top that this is a hangover from from a lot of people that are still thinking from the implementation side. And event modeling is not about implementation; it's a guide for information flow. Like, it's a guide using information flow so that you understand what the end goals are. And so there's some, valid questions about, like, well, what if your product is an API? Well, I would argue that the API is still there to have that company's end users still have that API provide something to some human being somewhere. And so event modeling always looks at, that level, and we don't want to do that. So I don't know if you have any additional things while I rethink what I was going to say about this, Martin.
I mean, does it really matter if the end product is an API or if it's a software system or an information system? I mean, basically, it's all the same. Even from the event modeling perspective, it's all the same. So I would not make any distinction there.
Yeah, I think there is also from my experience of implementing so many systems at our company for a decade now, using only event sourcing, that I really want to have fewer patterns to, again, we talk about this all the time, but I want fewer patterns to have to exercise for many reasons. Obviously, I get a lot more repeatability. I have a higher sample number for my estimates, etc. So anytime that I see, well, we can also do this, or we can also do this, I push back, because I know that this is just adding to the overhead of the knowledge that you need. And my question is always like, can you actually do this without adding another way of doing it? And the answer is yes. The second question is that limiting you or adding a lot of unnecessary work and a lot of overhead? And the answer to that is no. And after 10 years of doing exactly that, the answer is still no. And that's based on real projects with real people putting real solutions out there. So, the problem for me, obviously, is that the experience that we have as a company is using intellectual property of our clients. And so I can't just copy paste that into a book, but I can certainly relay that information and show how that is on generic examples of exactly how to do that. And then it's really up to you. Honestly, if you look at logical fallacies of argument, just because someone wrote a book, including you, Martin, doesn't mean it's right. You have to do your own research and all that.
No,
but
absolutely.
you certainly,
yes.
You take questions all the time about this kind of stuff and actively are involved in the community on the Discord channel. So if someone has a challenge to, something you said in one of the chapters, or someone has a challenge to something that I wrote in the article, the original article, or what we do in live streams or whatever, we're always happy to discuss that. I'm always involved in discussions and the comment threads on LinkedIn and on X and Blue Sky and whatever new social network there is. I'm quite happy to engage on these topics, because I understand that just like in agile adoption 20 some odd years ago, this was the same problem, and people just were used to other ways of working. You need to go through the hard discussions where people need to, stop working like they were and do it in a different way. And if you're highly experienced, especially, you might not even be, aware just how comfortable you've become with a practice, even though that practice may not be the most efficient, especially to someone that's new, but you are an expert in it, right? And so it's, I'm myself included. It took a long time for me to switch to event sourcing. I was already, a decade plus into agile and test-driven development. I was an expert in using mocks. I had a very big interest and a lot of practice in traditional BDD and using DSLs, creating, domain-specific languages for those that don't know. So creating these templates, like if you remember Cucumber, Fitness, and all of these different things that came out to really embody some of the ubiquitous language aspects, if you want to use domain-driven design terms, for being able to elaborate your requirements, but also automate them at the same time by creating these English language templates, or whatever your language is, doesn't matter. But so that's kind of to let go of that and say, I don't really need a DSL framework anymore. I don't need a mock anymore. I can just drop all that valuable skill set that I had and knowledge of some of these libraries that took me quite a while to do and even contribute to some of them. It can be painful, but I think the lesson there is that you've gained a perspective, a very good perspective of what the other side is. And I think it actually makes you better for switching to something else. I don't think you should feel like you've abandoned or betrayed the people that were doing that. I actually had a really good talk with Joshua Kurievsky, who's written an excellent book on the subjects of testing, etc. He's been quite an influential person in my life in terms of his work and his posts over the many years in and around Agile and around testing, especially in requirements. And so this was kind of neat because we got to discuss, why is event modeling not just design up front, but it's also a way to manage units of work to be quite flexible and agile, right? And he had quite a nice comment on LinkedIn about this is, quite an agile way of working because it's really testing, what agile got kind of painted to be versus what the true spirit of being flexible and accommodating to the changing needs of your customers, right? And it's really about that. It's like, how can you, if your customer says, I'm sorry, I got it wrong, can you change it here? We don't want to say, no, we're going to have another 6 months to work on a brand new design for you, right? No one wants that answer.
Yeah, that's the old world. That's not how we do it.
So, it was really good to why I'm talking about this is because revisiting what you were good at, and then also to be able to reconnect with those people that were there and to see that, if you have a conversation about it and show your experience, you're going to see that it's okay and move on to another thing. So I think like a command event state pattern's important. And I want to close off the topic by saying that having this little wave of information where you can only go in via command, only exit out of your system via a green box, a state view, a read model, whatever words you want to use for it, the state of the system. So it's always blue going in, only green going out, gives you an excellent amount of cadence. It keeps it simple because you have just these two core patterns there to accomplish everything else. And I think a lot of people have a tremendous problem replacing a UI with a set of gears or vice versa. I think, especially coming from a technical perspective, the to-do list is kind of harder for people to accept. It's really tough to get out of that mindset. As opposed to talking to a business person, they have no problem not doing that, and they have a quite an easy way of saying that, yeah, I have a to-do list, a state view. And even if these state views are empty, that's fine. Like I said, in event modeling, if a particular slice, which is the vertical part of the diagram, if there are fewer than, 3 or 4 scenarios, which means it's a dumb information pump, those are free. We don't include them in the estimate. So just being a little bit more elaborate to show that, yes, you're still using the same amount of pattern or the same pattern elements. Some of them can be empty, but you have this cadence of always knowing what to expect. And that's quite important also from the point of view of AI, as you provide fewer choices in the solutions you give as examples. All the automation you put in for authoring systems will be way more dependable. They don't have to decide between 3 or 4, 5 strategies. They're only deciding between 2. From that perspective, it's a lot cleaner. But anyway, anything else you want to add to that? But I think it's really important for people to keep things simple.
Absolutely. I fully agree. And I mentioned this, I think, countless times in the book. It's only these patterns. You don't need more than these patterns. And if you do work long enough with event modeling, you will even recognize these patterns without thinking. Whenever you talk to a third-party library, it's always a processor. No need to think about it. It's always the same thing. So the longer you work with it, the simpler it gets.
Yeah, we could probably provide some more examples for people that think they have an API, but and there's no, could maybe do some live streams of an API only product and how event modeling still uses to-do list green pattern for this. So we again, it's something that I don't want in event modeling because I don't want it to be more complicated. So with working with us, you'll never see an event hooking up directly to a command. It's always named. I mean, naming is important. Drawing a simple arrow might seem like you're being productive, but you're really cutting a corner of expressing that there's automation. And so from that perspective as well, it's important for us, and it's worked really well. Again, I'm not just, I didn't just come up with this idea because I thought it was, something fun to say or whatever. This actually comes out of many projects where that cadence was the difference. Like you just knew how things worked. You didn't have to swim through extra stuff. And that brings us to Sagas, right? So
yeah,
your webinar was great, by the way. It was a lot of good people there, and
it was pretty interesting.
And I was able to enjoy it because early in my day, so 8 a.m. I've been working nights, so waking up at 8 a.m. was tough that day, but I did it. And after struggling to get on Teams, I managed to be there.
And maybe we should. Not all people know that there was a webinar this week, so we could briefly mention it. So on Wednesday, I gave a webinar. Title was "Build Your Own Code Generator." So I just wanted to show how I build code generators, how I combine them with event modeling. But the interesting thing was, in the end, it evolved in a huge discussion with still 20 people who stayed. It was pretty interesting. So the whole webinar didn't work as planned, but it was pretty interesting. So I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, people stayed afterward for quite a while to chat, which was always good. That's always a good sign. A lot of good topics. And like one of them was Sagas, right?
Yeah, exactly. One of the Sagas. Sagas always come up because it's one of the topics nobody really knows how to implement it, especially if you're not used to think in event-driven systems. It's hard to get your head around. Okay, what is a Saga? What does it actually mean? So these topics always come up. And Saga is the prior one topic, I think.
Yeah, so we can discuss that. So from my perspective, I had a stream during COVID when we moved our event, our meetups online, as everyone had to go online, and so we moved our event-driven meetup to be online, and that ended up being a topic that I think was discussed over 3 hours on one of those.
What is the
And
title? Something like Sagas don't exist or something?
yeah, sagas don't exist. As we really are 100% in the event sourcing world and actually see everything through the eyes of streams of information being stored, getting an account of what's happening through a report on multiple different events happening and seeing that as a live report. It ends up just being another green box or set of green boxes with a set of gears. So the idea of this box having all this intricate stuff because it's a processor, a Saga, or something that's, this black box that's magically coordinating your vacation booking with the flight and car and whatever else needs to happen. We expose that complexity by making it a set of gears and using good notation for that. We have those blue arrows across the top of an event model. Some people use, I think you're using rectangles around those areas. Some people use something else, but I use these blue arrows to really, with labels on them, to show what's happening. And that's been, demystifying. Well, first of all, Martin, what is the goal of a Saga? Maybe you can explain that better than I can.
I don't think I can explain it better, but if you look at a Saga, it's always like orchestrating a process across several systems or several components. You need to orchestrate something across some boundaries. And typically, if you work with Sagas, they always tend to grow in complexity incredibly. They get incredibly complex because they're doing things they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
Doing too much. Yeah, that's
my first experience with that type of problem was long before any kind of rehashing of the Saga pattern. I think there was an original Saga definition, which was a lot more technical in nature, of distributing transactions across multiple databases purely from the technical perspective. Yeah. And then I believe it was Udi Dahan that renamed or rethought of Saga to not be a technical only approach, but it's really like what you said, an orchestrator of business logic. And I guess with event source systems and event driven systems, it's really coordinating these events that are happening across multiple services, that now you have this place for all of that to sit and be, isolated from everything else. But like you said, it does grow to be a little bit cumbersome. And I think I had, the first signs of that that I saw in my work was working with BizTalk Server, which was a Microsoft technology, gluing things together using that. And you had little places where you could insert C# to help you with your transformation. So kind of, you could think of it as a little place of code, place for code that you could have your transformation put in with a filter that you could write with custom C# and something like that. Yeah. And what would happen inevitably is that these little places to adjust data ended up becoming their own programs. So it just became this really lopsided, ugly architecture, because, the business rules ended up falling where you had the most control without the strict dials and knobs of BizTalk at the top level. And so, this kind of works, but I have these specific other requirements. So, where does the code live? It lives here. So this little anti-corruption layer, if you want to use DDD terms, would just grow and grow and grow and actually house a lot of stuff. So I think anytime you have this idea that, like, I have a orchestrator or whatever, putting this boundary around something, we see this also with aggregates and other ideas, does tend to maybe unnaturally give a focal point for, all other changes. It's like a magnet, and then it ends up growing. So that's a reason I personally, and we don't really use Sagas, although in our implementation, we do have the word Saga because people are used to that. So if you look at our source code that we do for our clients, you will notice that. And that's one of the reasons is that people are so used to seeing that word. But our implementation is exactly like you see in event models, where the Saga actually is just a set of gears.
You deconstruct it. Yeah,
is deconstructed and understandable by everyone. So whatever complexity you would have in a typical Saga implementation, it's stretched out, and it doesn't make, again, back to the original point, an extra pattern for people to understand to just get the work done, right? We really want to lower that level of, barrier to adoption. We want to lower that, a barrier to understanding, a barrier to readability. All of those things you're going to get by keeping things simple. And maybe this whole episode boils down to it's really hard to keep things simple in our industry.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, it's so much easier to think about all these single process steps in a timeline than to think about this big bloated thing that coordinates or orchestrates process. It's so much easier to think about it. And for me, it's the same as for you. I typically don't use Sagas in the code. It's not necessary. You don't need them. You don't need them.
Yeah, keep things simple. I know that, I know personally, there's a nice, especially if you're new, you feel like you have to know all of these things. And so you should read about them and maybe practice them. But in the end, you should always try to keep your own workings of how you work with systems to be quite simple. But it's, I think the industry has a problem because a lot of times there is gatekeeping and there's imposter syndrome. And then if you don't have enough buzzwords in your resume, you feel like you're not going to get the job. I've been there, and that was definitely prevalent in the 90s when I certainly felt gatekept out of a lot of places where I wanted to work, and I'm sure others have the same feeling. You have to just realize that this knowledge and the buzzword collection on your LinkedIn profile serves a purpose, and it's very different than actual implementation. You might have a little bit more of a perspective, but the actual benefit of being a good practitioner is being able to do things in a simple way. Unfortunately, a lot of these buzzwords do bring in the opposite. They end up bringing up complexity if you were to throw everything that you have on your resume to implement one solution, I doubt it would be maintainable.
But the problem is that in the beginning, it always looks simple. Even starting a Saga is simple in the beginning because it's easy, but half a year later, it's a completely different story. And 1 year later, you're basically looking at a big ball of mud.
Exactly. Or this lopsided, architecture. It's essentially like a weird place where the God class comes up, this anti-pattern of like one class that does everything. Like it ended up being with these adapters or adjustment places in the BizTalk server stuff. So
I've seen this a lot. I've seen Sagas turn into their own microservices and their own teams maintaining them because they were so big. Suddenly you had this whole thing that had its own life cycle managed by a completely dedicated team. And in the first place, this shouldn't even exist.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting sometimes.
Yeah. So that's a really good point, because what you've done by not keeping things simple is you've made another team, and that's another word for saying you've made another silo of information, right? All of a sudden, this coordination is no longer a directly owned by other teams. And so now they're further disconnected, right? Where those teams would sometimes talk to each other. Now they're talking through an intermediary. And so you get that broken telephone problem there.
Yeah, and it creates so much coupling. There's so much coupling everywhere, and you don't even see it, and you don't realize. Suddenly, everything feels slow, nothing works, and you don't know why. It's coupling everywhere.
Yeah. And that's Conway's law, obviously, where you have that communication between teams kind of evident in your architecture. One pushes the other, and so this is another way of showing that the Saga can, by adding an extra gear into your machine. The more gears, if you ever built Lego stuff, the more gears you add, you notice that it doesn't, you can really notice the accumulation of friction, right? And so let's just leave on the note that, Saga is another gear that a lot of people see as useful, but when in practice you see that it is, in effect, adding friction, especially with the fact that you could replace it with just regular coordination of information going across these systems with just more set of gears on automation on an event model, and that would do the job.
I think I think this whole discussion is pretty abstract for someone who is not into the topic. So it really I really realized this all when I implemented it as a Saga, and then I implemented it as a set of processes and looked at the difference, and I saw it directly. Okay, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, when you just see it as information flow, all of a sudden you do see that the extra packaging, the extra abstractions isn't really helping anyone.
Exactly.
So yeah, we have a lot of pet projects in this industry that we make that I think is a good idea. But yeah, deleting code is good. This is another reason to delete code, right? People that want to delete more code to have a simpler solution, delete your Sagas.
Yeah. I mean, some people might disagree, of course.
Yeah, of course they would. I mean, I definitely think this is going to be one of the more controversial episodes, but that's good because even if you still keep going, at least you know that you got to think about these things, and that's good. That'll make you a better person. Even if you continue using Sagas, maybe you'll keep in the back of your mind that you need to still keep things simple, and if you can accomplish that, fine. We've served our purpose of showing that there is a way to keep things simpler than what you're doing. But if you have our perspective, at least you know that you can answer some criticisms of how you've done it, and maybe show that you've implemented a Saga maybe with the right amount of transparency as a middle ground, and maybe that's what's going to keep you from making things too complicated.
Yeah. I mean, even you say sometimes you implement Sagas for a customer, so it's not black and white. So you can do both. If you absolutely need a Saga, it's fine, but it's good to know that there is also another way.
Yeah, I mean, I think to clarify why we implemented Sagas, it's mostly that we have all sorts of types of clients that are entirely looking at us to do all the implementation, where we do things the way we see the most straightforward way. But then we also have clients that have their technical teams, and we work with them, and we're not going to change their way of working in every single way overnight, and that's just not good. And so if they're already using Sagas and all that, our event models might even call one of those blue arrows. This is actually, if you're watching the video version of this podcast, I do have a backdrop of an event model behind me now. So if you look above my head, those blue arrows are actually, what we would replace a Saga with, saying that, this is a long-running workflow that does this, and give it a really good name. So we probably, to work with that team, technically, we would implement a Saga for doing that. But when we're talking via the event model to their business, they don't know what a Saga is. And so we would just, not complicate it by putting that word there. That's an implementation way that particular workflow is implemented. But when talking with the business people, they're just seeing these screens go, the progression of the system through what screens people see, from what information the system captures along the way, and that these goals are met, and that these conditions are satisfied. So definitely with those clients that are more technical, that have a technical team that already have that, we're not going to change everything that they do. We'll do the implementations that they like, and it still works. So just because you're doing things in a new way from the event modeling perspective, you already have some sort of a stack for doing event source solutions. You still work together, and that's one of the benefits of event modeling, is that it gives you that translation between all of these implementation styles.
It works because we don't put implementation details into the event model. We only model
exactly.
You can implement whatever you want. It's only the information flow.
Exactly. Yeah. And then of course there's the entirely, the clients that are entirely technical. There's technical people that want to learn event modeling or event sourcing. And in that case, we have, I guess, a lot more, a better roadmap to adopting some of these things or how to drop some of the old ways that their leadership wants to kind of find a way to implement, like a way of teaching people to not do something that's caused issues. Maybe they had really long running integration tests or acceptance tests that, so we can sort of teach how to implement, a bunch of these green boxes to do the subcutaneous level testing, and bring their test times down to, a very, very rapid pace. So, a lot of times I guess the last point on the Saga topic is that a way of looking at state just below the surface level, just behind the API or just behind the UI, is really where things matter. That's where the logic lives. And so having a good quote unquote API to that is these green boxes and coordinating them. So yeah, these highly technical companies also they really just want to show everyone that, hey, there's the simple thing that works, and we got this team that has worked this way, and so they can help us implement some of those templates we'll use internally for then, having a simpler way of doing things. And that's for those high technical teams. They really, really want our stack. They want, like, where's the answer? Give me this. I can use it for my next service, so I can go as fast as you say you can, or adopt a fixed cost or something. So we're happy to do that. But I think it's, the stack itself isn't that important. It's really about the confidence to go with these simpler patterns. So that's where, the collaboration with teams that are experienced with it works really well. It sounds like a sales pitch for what we do, but that's the way the world works. So if you want highly experienced people that have done this and you want to kind of get a leg up on that and not spend 6 months or a year implementing this from scratch and learning it the hard way, can expedite that. You still have to do it. I mean, there's still, real experience is not something you can buy off the shelf. It's something you got to go through, but it really does help when you have people by your side to help you not waste time, on a week of hitting your head against the wall, and just do it in a couple of hours with some people that know what they're doing.
I mean, that's definitely true. I mean, you can bang your head against the wall for 1 or 2 weeks without solving the problem. And it's
happens to all of us, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I did that. But that makes me a good person to help.
Yeah. I mean, someone can help me if they've done a lot of IndexedDB stuff. I've been hitting my head against the wall with some of the IndexedDB event store implementation, which I hate. For if you're doing an event store in browser, IndexedDB is kind of a way to do it, and it's got some funky indexing stuff that I don't. It's a pet project, so I keep coming back to it. I keep hitting my head, and then I'll think about it overnight and do it again. And it's just, I've been saying this to myself for 5 nights in a row. I think it's time to look for someone that's worked with IndexedDB for a while. So if you want to make a quick buck, you can contact me, and I'll buy your services for a little bit to sit down on and work on that. So just like, and I expect to be that person for someone doing event sourcing or event modeling. Likewise, you are, Martin, too. So I'm in Vancouver, Canada on, Los Angeles time, Vancouver time, and you're in Germany, I guess, England time, German time, many other countries. There's way more countries that fit in the time zone in Europe. So you're there to help those people, and I'm here to try and help people in North America. So, but either or, we can still work around those things. There's a good enough overlap between our time zones to work together too.
Absolutely.
So that, I think, concludes our episode. Maybe we just do a quick reminder. Don't forget about the workshop next Saturday. That's coming up real quick. So lots of people are signing up with more information about it coming out this week, of course. So that's going to be exciting. And don't forget about the missing chapters coming up. We already have one on metadata, and you're putting out the security one for the book.
Hopefully
still
today.
Number 1 on LeanPub. Go to LeanPub, click on books, top 1. Can't miss it. And then the print version on Amazon. So that's exciting. I can't wait to get mine. And yeah, sign up for the workshop. A Discord channel, if you want to talk to us anytime, hit the Discord channel. It's on the resources page on eventmodeling.org. All the other announcements are there as well on the homepage of eventmodeling.org. And do check out the show notes. But thanks for joining us this week. And we'll be back next week again. So, yeah, that's it. Anything else, Martin, you want to add?
Now, if you have topics you want us to discuss, feel free to announce them in the Discord. So we're always looking for topics. We went a bit over time today, didn't we?
Yeah, sometimes when we get passionate about something or something controversial, we may go over time. So maybe some minutes will be saved in the editing, but we'll probably be back to our usual half hour next week.
Discussion.
Yeah, it's hard to stop a good discussion, right? So anyway, that's it, right, Martin?
That's it. Exactly.
All right. Well, see you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you at the same time.
See you next week on Sunday on the workshop.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ah, that was good.
Yeah, that was fun.